In Chapter 1 of A People's History, we see three different presidents discussed: President Reagan, President Carter, and President Bush. And first, it talked about Reagan and how in the Federal Communications Commission, they got rid of fairness on radio talk shows, so only really one side of the argument was represented, so it wasn't fairly represented. And organized groups tried to bring back that protesting atmosphere that was kind of in the 60s and 70s. So people tried to bring back major protests and that sort of thing. And President Carter, he tried to help the poor, and he talked about human rights and talked about helping the poor, but he really kept the older system and only protected the people with wealth and power. So he talked about helping them, but he didn't follow through with it. He created a large, strong military. He spent a lot of money on the military. He wanted to get rid of people's disappointment in the government from the last few times, but he didn't really. And he tried to pretend to appeal to the lower classes, and I think he really did try, but he did cater to the upper classes too. He tried to settle peace with South Africa and in other countries too. He tried to combine practical needs with civil rights. But the U.S. still supported imprisonment, torture, and mass murder in other countries, so he tried to settle peace with other countries so that he could use their natural resources, but then they were still killing in other countries. And it sounded like that the U.S. was generous and it helped other countries in their times of need, like if they were in trouble, they needed need. But under Carter, 100,000 West Africans died of starvation over a period of time, and the U.S. did nothing to help. And he, like I said, he wanted to restore people's faith in the government, but he failed solving the economic problems of this time. And in 1979, he weakly tried to help the poor again, and still he had a large military budget and everything. And Reagan and President Bush kind of did the same things, but worked on the same things since they were one after each other. And in their time, they filled 837 judgeships and appointed right-wing justices to the Supreme Courts. And there was kind of corporate America during their years as presidency, and they really tried hard to work to improve the economy. Bush was also called the environmental president. In 1990, he signed the Clear Air Act to try and clear the air. He looked into helping the contaminated drinking water, because there's a lot of cases of contaminated water, but they weren't really investigated, but he worked to doing that. And then he was concerned about the burning of fossil fuels and global warming, trying to get rid of global warming. President Reagan did a budget cut thing that caused a lot of problems in America. Unemployment grew, poverty grew, children were starving, didn't have enough money, didn't have enough food, and at the end of his presidency there's a gap between the rich and the poor that grew really large. And Reagan and Bush all together were both pretty aggressive in military use. They also spent a lot of money on the military. And then under Bush, they learned in the Soviet Union, Gorbachev was kind of the dictator of the Soviet Union, which became a big problem. And then during this time, some of the issues were the Cold War, which the U.S. won, and having the threat from the Soviet Union. And then also in this chapter, Bush goes to war with Iraq, and they go to the war with Iraq, which was a big deal.